The scream tore through the compound like a blade splitting cloth. Amara lay on the bare earth, her swollen belly exposed to the burning sun, blood pooling beneath her like spilled palm wine. The child in her womb had stopped moving 3 days ago, but Kofi had not called the healer. Instead, he had dragged her from their hut by her wrapper, his face twisted with a fury that seemed to come from somewhere far deeper than mere anger. "Get out!" he had shouted, his voice carrying across the entire settlement of Kibwe. "You are barren inside. You will bear only curses. I will not have my name die with a woman who cannot give me sons." Her sister's daughter, Zainab, stood beneath the acacia tree, her hand pressed to her mouth in feigned shock. But her eyes glittered like polished obsidian. She had been living in their compound for only 4 moons, and in those 4 moons, everything had shifted like sand in the wind. Zainab's voice was sweet as honey drawn from the hive. Her skin gleamed like wet clay. When she moved through the cooking fire, the flames seemed to dance toward her. Now, as Amara collapsed outside the village gate, crying out the name of a husband who would not come, Zainab was already comforting him in their hut, already arranging her wrapper around her shoulders in the way that made his eyes blur, already whispering words that made him forget the woman who had brought him prosperity for 7 years. The villagers gasped. Some covered their mouths with trembling hands. Others turned away, unable to watch. At the market, the women stopped their trading. The pots of cassava paste sat abandoned as they gathered in clusters, their voices rising and falling like the evening cicadas. "Did you hear?" one whispered, balancing a calabash of palm oil on her head. Kofi threw out his pregnant wife, threw her out like yesterday's refuse. The elders gathered under the great tree, shaking their heads in grave agreement. Their voices were low, but their words were sharp. "A man who can betray the mother of his future child has forgotten who he is," the oldest said, his weathered hands trembling. "The spirits do not forget such cruelty," another added. "The spirits do not forget." This saying would become the heartbeat of the village's whispers in the months to come. Amara was Kofi's second wife, but she had been his greatest blessing. She came to him as a young woman from the neighboring hamlet of Umoja, her dowry modest, but her character immense. Her father was a fisherman of little means, but her mother had trained her in the old ways of healing. Amara could read the body's signals like writing on bark. She knew which roots cured fever, which leaves stopped bleeding, which bark soothed the aching joints of the elders. Her hands were strong and gentle, and when she touched a fevered child, the mothers of Kibwe said the sickness fled as if frightened. In the 7 years of their marriage, Amara had borne him 3 children, all living, 2 sons and 1 daughter. The sons were sturdy, with their father's broad shoulders and their mother's gentle eyes. The daughter, named Zara, had Amara's gift for healing and her father's stubborn will. Yet Kofi had begun to believe the whispers of the barren women who gathered at the river, women whose own marriages had crumbled like clay in water. They told him that he needed a younger wife, a more beautiful wife, a wife who could give him strength. They planted seeds in his mind, like farmers planting cassava, and Kofi, who had once been a humble goat herder, content with his modest life, began to grow hungry. The transformation was slow. First, he stopped coming to Amara's sleeping mat. Then he stopped eating the food she prepared. Then he stopped speaking to her, except to give commands. When she asked him what was wrong, he would turn away. When she tried to hold his hand, he would pull it back as if her touch had burned him. The village women saw this. They saw how Amara's shoulders began to curve inward, how her eyes lost their brightness, how she moved through the market as if she was walking underwater. Zainab's arrival had seemed like blessing. She was his wife's younger sister, sent to learn household management before her own marriage could be arranged. She was only 16 seasons old, with a body that moved like water, with eyes that held a kind of knowing that should not have belonged to someone so young. The village women whispered that she had been blessed by the river spirits themselves. Men forgot their names when she passed. Young boys stood frozen, unable to move or speak. But there was something else about Zainab, something that the villagers could not quite name. When she smiled, it did not reach her eyes. When she spoke of love, her voice carried no warmth. She was like a mask made of beauty, covering something hollow underneath. Yet Kofi did not see this. He saw only what she wanted him to see. Love had made him blind, and not love for Amara, but love for the image of himself that Zainab showed him in her eyes. For 4 moons, Zainab had worked slowly, like poison seeping into water, like a termite eating through the foundation of a house. She would serve Amara her morning food, but always ensuring that her own portions were larger, more carefully prepared. She would sit with Kofi in the evenings, asking him questions about his dreams, his desires, his regrets. She would touch his arm when she spoke, letting her fingers linger on his skin. She would tell him, in that voice like honey, that Amara was growing old, that her beauty was fading, that the pregnancy was destroying her body. "A wife should make you proud when you walk through the village," Zainab would whisper, her lips near his ear, her breath warm against his neck. "A wife should make the other men envy you. She should be like a prize, not like yesterday's cassava wrapper." Amara knew what was happening. She saw it in the way Kofi's eyes no longer found hers across the cooking fire. She felt it in the coolness of his hands when he touched her at all. But she said nothing. She continued to wake before dawn to prepare his food, making it the way he loved it, with palm oil and the right amount of salt. She continued to tend the yam fields, her growing belly making the work harder with each passing day. She continued to help the village women with their births and their sicknesses, using the healer's gift that lived in her bones. And she grew larger with the child within her, a child she knew, with the certainty of the healer's gift, would be stillborn. The gift had come to her in childhood. Her mother had touched her head one night and whispered words in the language of the ancestors, and from that moment, Amara could see things that other people could not see. She could see illness before it showed itself. She could see the moment when the body would heal or when death would come. She could see the future of unborn children like watching shadows on a wall. It was a terrible gift. It was a beautiful gift. It could not be refused. The night before Kofi cast her out, she had told him. She had held his hand and placed it on her belly, and she had said, with a voice like stone, "This child will not live, Kofi. I have known for many days. My gift tells me this. The child comes already cold. The spirit does not wish to inhabit this body. We must prepare ourselves for this sorrow." He had pulled his hand away as if her skin had burned him. He had stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the darkness. And then he had spoken words that would echo through the rest of his life. "Then what use are you?" 5 words. 5 words that contained everything that had been poisoned in their marriage. 5 words that Amara would remember every time she closed her eyes for the rest of her life. 5 words that would become the price that Kofi would pay forever. A man who forgets the woman who gave him sons will never recognize his own worth when he has forgotten her, the village mothers would later say. The next morning, before the sun had properly risen, Kofi came to her where she slept. He did not speak. He simply grabbed her by the arm and pulled her up, pulled her through the compound, pulled her toward the gate. Amara did not resist. A woman who has seen her own future does not waste energy on resistance. She gathered her wrapper around her and allowed him to drag her into the dust. When they reached the gate of the settlement, he threw her forward. She fell to her knees, her hands scraping against the hard earth. Her belly ached with a deep, pulling pain. When she looked back, Kofi was already walking away, his shoulders straight, his head held high, as if throwing out his pregnant wife was something to be proud of. The village women came to her at the gate, bringing water, bringing cloth, bringing what comfort they could offer to a woman rejected. They washed her bleeding body and wrapped her in fresh cloth. They brought her to the small hut at the edge of the settlement where the healers lived, where the rejected women found shelter. These women had survived their own betrayals. They knew the shape of this pain. They moved around Amara with the quiet efficiency of those who have already walked this path. Amara labored through the night and into the next day. The pain was immense, like her body was being torn apart from the inside. The old healer women sat with her, wiping her forehead, giving her cloth to bite on, telling her stories of other women who had survived, other women who had endured. And the child came, small and still, exactly as she had foreseen. The village women wept, but Amara did not. She was a healer, and she knew the difference between tragedy and consequence. She knew that some things are written in the bones before birth. She held the tiny body in her hands and whispered the old prayers, the prayers that guide the young spirits back to the ancestors. The spirits do not forget betrayal, the old healer women said. Neither do we. Within the cycle of 2 moons, Kofi married Zainab properly. The ceremony took place with fewer guests than a normal wedding. The village women had made their feelings clear through their absence. The market was empty when his family tried to trade. The fishermen would not sell him their best catches. Zainab laughed at their rejection, confident that her beauty would eventually win them over. She could not conceive of a world that would not want her, could not imagine eyes that would not follow her, could not believe in a love that would not destroy itself for her. But Zainab was not content to be merely a wife. She was hungry, the way only certain women can be hungry, not for food, not for love, but for dominion. She wanted to remake Kofi into something magnificent, something that would make the village regret their coolness toward her. Instead, she began to unmake him entirely. She began to sell things from Kofi's compound. First, his carved wooden stools, the work of the finest craftsmen 3 villages over. These were heirlooms, passed down from his father's father, crafted with designs that told stories of the village's history. Zainab sold them to a trader from a distant land, receiving a fraction of their true value. Then his bronze bracelets, gifts from his father given on the day Kofi became a man. Then his goats, one by one, sold to traders passing through from distant settlements. Kofi did not stop her. He was like a man asleep, his will entirely borrowed from hers. The village women watched and said nothing. They simply allowed things to proceed as they must. They allowed the consequences to unfold like cloth being unwound. They knew that what was happening was written in the heavens, and no woman's words could change it. 6 moons into their marriage, Zainab took a lover, a younger man from the next village, a trader with silver tongue and empty pockets. The village women saw them together at the river, saw her hands touching his face, saw her wrapper being removed in the tall grass beneath the great mango tree. They watched, and they said nothing to Kofi. Instead, they began to whisper the ancient saying, "Some gifts always have a price," the mothers warned, "and the price of beauty without character is always paid in sorrow." Word came to Kofi not from the village, but from a traveling musician who passed through Kibwe. The musician had seen Zainab in the market of the next village, seen her laughing with another man, seen her leading him toward a hut. The musician recognized her from the wedding ceremony and brought the news to Kofi as payment for lodging. When Kofi heard this, something in him cracked like pottery dropped on stone. He went to his compound and found it half empty. The valuables were gone. The cloth was gone. The calabashes, the mortar and pestle, the baskets woven by his mother's hands, all gone. The very things that Amara had cared for so carefully, arranged just so, were scattered across other villages, sold for pennies. Zainab had taken everything, and she had left no message, no explanation, no note of apology or farewell. She had simply disappeared like morning mist, like smoke rising from the cooking fire, like a promise that was never real to begin with. Kofi called out her name through the settlement. His voice grew raw and desperate. He asked the traders if they had seen her. He asked the travelers if they knew where she had gone. No one had answers. No one had mercy. Zainab had erased herself from Kibwe the way she had come, like a beautiful, terrible dream. The village women gathered at the well and spoke no words of sympathy. Instead, they repeated the warning. A man who forgets the woman who gave him sons will never recognize his own sons when they no longer know him. And the saying proved true with a speed that made the elders shake their heads in wonder at the precision of the spirit's justice. Kofi's 3 children, still young, began to drift away from him. The eldest son, barely able to carry water, was taken in by the fishermen elders who taught him their trade. The fishermen had loved Amara for her healing hands, and they loved her children as a way of honoring her memory. The middle son went to live with the blacksmith, learning the secrets of fire and metal. The blacksmith had been healed by Amara years before when a terrible burn threatened his arm. He had sworn then that he would repay her kindness in any way he could. When her sons came to him, parentless and lost, he took them in as if they were his own blood. Only the daughter, Zara, remained with Kofi for a time. But she was silent, watching her father with eyes that held no recognition of the man he had become. She had been 7 seasons old when her mother was cast out, old enough to understand betrayal, young enough that the wound would never fully heal. She looked at her father and saw a stranger. She looked at him and saw the man who had destroyed the only truly good person she had ever known. When she was old enough, Zara followed her mother to the river settlement where Amara had gone. She did not tell her father. She simply left one morning, walking out of the compound and never returning. Kofi found her gone and wept, understanding too late that his children would choose their mother's memory over his presence. Kofi aged rapidly, as if the 3 years since Amara's exile had been 30. His back curved like a bow drawn too tight. His hands shook when he tried to work. The goats he had left were sickly and thin, their bones showing through their skin. The yam fields, which Amara had tended with such care and patience, grew wild with weeds. The vines strangled the young yams before they could grow strong. The earth itself seemed to reject his touch, the way it rejects the hands of those who have committed great cruelty. He sat alone in his compound, surrounded by the memory of plenty, and he understood at last what he had done. He had traded a woman of genuine gold for a woman of painted clay. He had traded a healer for a destroyer. He had traded the future for the moment. And now he sat in emptiness, watching the dust blow through rooms that had once been full of love and purpose and children's laughter. The neighbors stopped coming. The village women stopped leaving food at his gate. Even the beggars who sometimes passed through found nothing to beg from a man who had nothing to give. Kofi became invisible in his own village, a living ghost, a warning that moved through the market without anyone wanting to acknowledge his presence. One afternoon, as he sat staring at nothing, an old woman appeared at his compound gate. She was impossibly ancient, her skin like the bark of the baobab, her eyes like stars that had seen 1,000 years. She carried no basket, wore no wrapper, and yet she moved as if the earth itself was carrying her. Kofi knew, though he could not say how he knew, that this was not a woman of the village. This was something far older, something that had been watching from the beginning of time. "You threw out the healer," the woman said. Her voice sounded like wind moving through a dried forest, like the creaking of old wood, like the whisper of voices long dead. It sounded like the river speaking, like the earth itself opening its mouth to judge him. "I did," Kofi said. He did not ask who she was. He did not wonder how she knew. Some truths are too vast to deny. Some truths arrive with a force that requires no introduction. "You threw out the woman who carried your son," the old woman continued. She was moving closer now, moving like smoke, moving like she had always been there and would always be there. "You threw out the woman whose hands had saved the lives of your people. You threw out the woman who loved you when you were nothing but a goat herder with empty pockets and a hole in his heart." Kofi felt tears moving down his face, but he could not remember when he had begun to cry. The tears came from somewhere deep, from a place he had not known existed. They came like the first rains after the dry season, like water breaking through a dam, like the body releasing what the mind could not hold. "Do you know what it means to be a healer?" the old woman asked. She was standing very close now, and Kofi could smell something on her. The smell of earth after rain, the smell of roots growing deep, the smell of the river at midnight, the smell of things that were older than memory. "A healer does not heal because she hopes for thanks," the woman continued. "A healer does not heal because she expects reward. A healer heals because the gift demands it. The gift is a burden, and it is a blessing, and it cannot be separated. It is like being bound to something eternal, something that will not release you, something that requires everything you have and gives back only the knowledge that you have done what was required." "I understand," Kofi whispered. But he did not understand. Not truly. Not yet. "Do you?" The old woman's eyes burned with a fire that was not of this world. "Your wife understood something that you are only now beginning to know. She understood that she could see the future of her own child. She understood that the child would not live. She understood that the pain would be immense, that the loss would destroy parts of her soul, and she carried that child anyway. She carried it through the pain and the sorrow, knowing that it would come stillborn, knowing that it would come cold and lifeless and empty of promise. She did this because that is what healers do. They bear the unbearable, and they do not ask for reward. They do not demand thanks. They do not say, 'Remember me when I am gone.'" The old woman reached out and touched Kofi's forehead with a finger that was warm as fire and cold as ice. The touch burned and froze him simultaneously. The touch opened something in him, a door that had been locked since childhood. "You threw out the woman who saved you," the old woman said. Her voice was not cruel, but it was implacable, like the voice of the earth itself speaking truth that cannot be denied. "You threw out the woman who would have cared for you in your age, who would have held your hand when death came for you, who would have washed your body and sung the old prayers. And you have spent the last 3 years understanding, for the first time, what it means to have nothing. Your sons will not know you. Your daughter will not speak your name. Your wealth is scattered across other villages in the hands of people who care nothing for you. And you will die in this compound alone, the way you threw out the woman who would have made your death a thing of peace and dignity. Can I not repair this?" Kofi's voice was broken. His words came out like the cry of a wounded animal. Can I not ask her forgiveness? Can I not make amends? Can I not give her something, anything, to show that I have understood my error? The old woman's expression did not change. She looked at Kofi with eyes that had seen the rise and fall of kingdoms, that had watched empires crumble into dust, that had witnessed every tragedy and triumph that the world could offer. "Amara is at the river now," the old woman said. "She heals the people of 3 villages. She has taken a new husband, a gentleman, a widower with children who love her like she is made of the same substance as themselves. She is happy in the way only those who have survived true cruelty can be happy. She does not think of you. She does not remember your name. When people speak of you, she turns away and continues her work." The old woman turned to leave. Her form began to shimmer, to become less solid, to return to whatever place she had come from. "Wait," Kofi called out. His voice was desperate now, the voice of a man drowning. "Please, tell me something. Tell me why this happened. Was it the gift? Did Amara curse me? Did she use the healer's power against me?" The old woman paused. She looked back at Kofi with eyes that held all the sorrow of the world, all the pain that love could inflict, all the regret that came from loving the wrong things in the wrong ways. "No," she said. "Amara blessed you. She blessed you with a child that would not die in a world of pain and suffering. She blessed you with a wife who loved you without condition. She blessed you with a community that forgave you every flaw. She blessed you with days that could have been filled with meaning. The curse was not hers, Kofi. The curse was always yours. You cast it upon yourself the moment you believed that beauty was more valuable than goodness. That's when the rot began. That's when you began your own destruction. The spirits simply honored your choice. They gave you exactly what you asked for. And then the old woman was gone. She dissolved like mist, like smoke, like something that had never been real to begin with. Kofi was alone in his compound, and he understood, in that moment, the full weight of what he had lost. Not just Amara, not just his children, not just his wealth, but his own soul, which he had traded for the fleeting pleasure of beauty without meaning. The years that followed were quiet and gray. Kofi lived in his compound, moving like a ghost through the spaces where his family had once been. He moved through the cooking area where Amara had prepared food with such love and care. He moved through the sleeping chambers where he had once known peace. He moved through the courtyard where his children had played, their laughter now replaced by the sound of wind through empty spaces. The village women brought him food sometimes, not from kindness, but from obligation. The elders visited him once, and they did not speak. They simply sat with him in silence, the way one sits with the dying. They sat with him and allowed him to understand that there are fates worse than death, that some people are meant to live in isolation, that some men must face what they have become with no possibility of redemption. And Zainab, the beautiful one, she was seen years later in a distant market, her beauty fading like a river drying up in the dry season. Her skin had grown rough from exposure to the sun. Her hair had lost its luster. Her hands were calloused and cracked from labor. Her eyes had become hollow, haunted by the knowledge that she had been beautiful once and that beauty would never return. She had been taken by the trader to 5 different villages, each time abandoned for someone younger, each time finding herself with nothing but the clothes on her body and the knowledge that she had destroyed herself for momentary pleasure. She worked as a washer of cloth now, scrubbing other people's garments in the river, her back bent from the labor, her fingers raw from the harsh soap. She worked without dignity or peace, moving through the marketplace like a shadow. The men who had once desired her turned away. The women did not speak to her. She had become a cautionary tale, the way that beautiful women who are empty inside eventually become invisible. She had become less than nothing. She had become a warning. The story was told at the market for generations. The mothers told it to their daughters as a warning against the sin of envy, against the hunger for destruction, against the belief that beauty could substitute for character. The elders told it to their sons as a warning against the madness of desire, against the blindness of passion, against the way that hunger can make us forget everything that truly matters. And the saying that they repeated grew stronger with each telling, grew deeper with each repetition, became more true with each generation that passed it on. A man who forgets the woman who gave him sons will never recognize his own worth when he has forgotten her. Such a man becomes a ghost in his own village. Such a man dies without being mourned. Such a man's name is forgotten before his body returns to the earth. Amara lived to see her grandchildren, healthy and strong, born to the new husband who cherished her with the devotion of one who understood how precious a gift she truly was. She became renowned as the finest healer in the region. Young women came to her not just for cures for fever and pain and childlessness, but for wisdom about how to live, how to love without losing themselves, how to survive betrayal and transform it into purpose. And though she never spoke of Kofi by name, the story of what had happened lived in her silence. It lived in the scars she did not hide. It lived in the strength that had transformed her betrayal into something sacred. It lived in the way she treated others with a gentleness that came from having been broken and having found her own way to healing. It lived in the legacy she left, not just in the children and grandchildren who carried her blood, but in the hundreds of people she had healed, in the knowledge she had passed on, in the way the entire region came to understand that true power comes not from beauty, but from character. And so the village learned, through the lives of these two broken people, that the gifts we take for granted are the ones most certain to be lost. The woman we call common, the woman we call plain, the woman we think we can discard like old refuse. She might be true gold, glowing with a light that beauty can never match. The woman we call beautiful, the woman we desire above all things, the woman we would destroy everything to possess. She can be the finest rat, scurrying from one empty hole to the next, from one moment of pleasure to the next abandonment, from one false love to another. And a man who forgets who saved him when he had nothing, who throws away the hands that healed him, who trades meaning for a moment, such a man will spend his final days understanding, too late, that he was always the one truly abandoned. He was always the one truly alone. He was always the one who cast himself out, and no amount of regret could ever bring him home.